Hola, welcome everybody. My name is Imo Luna. I'm part of the network Sexta Grietas Norte, and today we're going to be presenting a series of a presentation, a report back of a recent trip that we were invited in July. This last July, we were able to go to the West Bank and travel to various communities. Uh, my presenters today are also part of Sexta Grietas Norte. Our presenters will be Padme Trujillo, originally from Querétaro, Mexico, Caitlin Manning, currently in San Francisco, Michelle Sang, currently in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and myself, who is residing in Kumeyaay Territory, San Diego. And today we have also a very special opportunity. We have some guests who will be joining us through a session before Q&A from the West Bank. So we're really honored to have them present during this presentation and also able to share some words from their voices about what's happening currently in the West Bank. And just very quickly, we were invited. Why did we ended up going to Palestine? I think that's something that would happen very last minute. But a member of our network from Grietas got a special invitation from Munir Fashed. He's a popular educator in Palestine, who has been accompanying Zapatismo through his time and who's through his education. And we received a special invitation from the Katan Foundation to visit Ramallah. Through our stay there, we were able to visit various communities from the West Bank. There was not just us. There was a series. There were many people from different European countries, from different nonprofits, and also cultural institutions, grassroots and nonprofits. That the intention was to be able to connect with other artists and cultural workers in Palestine, but particularly the West Bank, because that's where it was. We were able to travel. The intention was to know and hear and connect with different cultural spaces who could continue to resist and reside to be able to express what's happening and how to protect those cultural institutions, the histories. And we're going to be sharing through this presentation different videos that were collected by one of our presenters, Caitlin, who did most of the video that you'll be seeing here today. And you'll be able to hear different perspectives from different people from the different locations that we're able to visit. Some people were able to go to Jenin, others to Jerusalem, others to Bethlehem, others to Hebron, for example. So just really grateful for this opportunity to be able to share a little bit. There's so much we're still processing everything that we witness. But more importantly, such a blessed opportunity, the relationships that were built after this trip. And that shows by having some of our guests being able to be present today and share currently what's happening in the West Bank. And just really briefly, again, we're a network. We've been in existence since 2017. We're a Zapatista network that is accompanying the Zapatistas in Chiapas. We do not represent the Zapatistas from Chiapas. We are adherents to the Six. We also accompany the Indigenous National Movement, an indigenous movement in Mexico that follows and accompanies the Zapatista political framework. And just very welcome everybody that's here, and we'll get started to our presentation. But just very quickly, I'll have Kaylin introduce our guests since Kaylin and Michelle were the ones that interacted with the people that are coming in today. Thank you.
You're muted, Caitlin. You're muted again.
Okay. We're honored and muted to have hopefully up to 4 of our friends that we met in the West Bank join us today. At the moment, it looks like none of them are here yet. But when they come on, we'll greet them and then we will introduce them and they will hopefully talk to us and give us updates about what's going on in the West Bank at the end of the session.
Yeah. The only one here is currently is Hiva
But
currently.
it looks like she's not actually, I think she had to step away for a minute, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we should get started.
Next slide.
So this is,
Um,
that was generally the area that we were visiting, shows in that slide. Yeah.
just to give you an idea of these distances, like Palestine is actually it's quite small, and so just when we're looking at a map, knowing that like Hebron, the southernmost place that we visited, and we didn't go to Nazareth, but just to get an idea of like the area that we're moving within, it's about like 100 miles, and then from there to the coast, it's about 24 miles.
Next slide. Yeah.
The original plan consisted on Sexta Grietas sending 4 members to Palestine. However, only 3 of us could make it, as I got detained at the airport and interrogated until they extracted enough information to deny my entry. As part of the preparation that we did for the trip, we had a strong narrative about what we would tell the occupation authorities at the Tel Aviv airport as we entered through there. We were given a letter by an Israeli organization that participated at the Palestine Assembly of Assemblies, what Imad explained at the first slide, stating that we were invited to an arts and culture exchange, but did not mention the Palestine solidarity component of it. When the immigration officer asked me, "Why are you coming to Israel?" and I responded, she followed up with more questions about things that had nothing to do with it, such as my religion and my salary. She was suspicious. She eventually set me aside and asked that I waited as someone else would come and ask for more questions. I waited, sitting next to a Black person who apparently was also suspicious to them. A man eventually came and let them go, mispronouncing their name in the process. The same man politely invited me to his office and asked again, "Why are you coming to Israel?" To which I responded as rehearsed. The letter was addressed to Sexta Grietas del Norte, and as he looked them up on Instagram, he found posts supporting Palestine, which made him very upset. He raised his voice. "Is this what you believe in? There's no way that I let you into Israel. Now go outside and think about all your dangerous thoughts." After maybe an hour of waiting outside, 2 different officers came and took me to another office. That interrogation was brutal. They used all sorts of psychological manipulation techniques. They went through every social media platform on my phone, my Instagram archived stories, my photo gallery, and every time they found something related to Palestine, they asked me, "Why are you really coming to Israel?" They were particularly focused on me being a student and insisted on asking me if I had been to any Palestine demonstrations or university encampments, but their questions were not truly looking for my answer. Rather, they were violent, manipulative orders to confess to something. This experience made it clear that a crucial component of this genocide is the struggle for reality and for the power to determine what is true. I think that as soon as they realized that I do not believe that what is happening is a war against Hamas that justifies horrors and destruction perpetrated by Israel because they're the true victims, I became a threat to their eyes. And under a violent manifestation of the us versus them dichotomy, it became okay for them to mistreat me. At the end of it, they gave me a letter claiming that I got denied entry because of attempted illegal immigration and prohibiting my entry for the next 10 years. Next slide, please. Yes. The experience of interrogation was, of course, terrifying, but I believe that they were also scared. Demonstrations, encampments, boycotting, divesting, and sanctions, Palestinian cultural preservation, and global organizing are fractures in their system of death. Their need to detain and interrogate me for hours about my participation in these actions made it clear that they know it and they are frightened. So let us keep doing things that trigger the alarms of the genocidal state. That's it.
Next
Next
slide.
slide. Yes.
So this is a little montage that will give you a feeling for the land that we were traveling through. And you see that there's it's an ancient land full of terraces, some of them hundreds and hundreds of years old, and olive trees, lots of terraces and olive trees. And at the very end of the sequence, there's a pendant swinging in the windshield that the driver had, which is a map of Palestine, which I thought was very sort of symbolic. So play the video. Over there, it's Jordan on the other side of the mountains.
The mountain of Jordan. Itimar, the settlement in the top of the mountain is named Itimar. We have 4 settlements in this way.
Ooh, right, next slide. Yes, so sorry, there was something oh yeah, I just wanted to mention that the beautiful music in that montage is by George Lamam group. He's a Palestinian Lebanese living in the Bay Area, and he does a lot of events around Palestine, and that's his music. So when we arrived in Tel Aviv, we were driven to Ramallah, the capital of Palestine and the home of the Palestinian Authority, established in the 1993 Oslo Accords, ostensibly as a government in transition towards a Palestinian state, although that process was never adhered to. And the Palestinian Authority remains largely subordinate to Israel in most matters. Israeli army controls access to the city, and the occupation forces regularly enter Ramallah, even though they're not supposed to. It's in breach of the Oslo Accords. So play video. Okay. So we were very surprised at all the construction that we saw everywhere in Ramallah. And there's like white stone mansions in the streets near our hotel. There was BMWs everywhere. And we learned that the city had a huge real estate boom after the Oslo Accords. There's a lot of investment from oil-rich Gulf states like Qatar and Saudi Arabia and the UAE. So all that money like poured into Ramallah, much of it going to luxury housing projects and modern commercial centers. Our Palestinian friends sort of decried the changes in the city, describing the Oslo Accords as a kind of spearhead for neoliberal practices. And that they promote private investment and favor the wealthy and individualistic values. Land prices and rents have skyrocketed, making it very difficult for like working people to have affordable housing, and most of us in cities are familiar with that problem. And access to credit has led to credit and banking has led to like a very indebted population. And in general, it seems that at least before the current genocidal war, the trend in Ramallah was towards elevating like the role of money and the monetary transactions in all areas of social life, promoting kind of capitalist forms of life at the expense of Palestinian community traditions. One of our friends called it, it's a fake city, was how one Palestinian described it. And another talked about the increasing isolation in Palestinian cities. It's like, we suffer alone now. So that was the trend that we saw in Ramallah. Next slide.
So as Imwat was mentioning, the first part of our visit was with Catan Foundation. We went on different visits, and they organized these different visits for us to meet with folks across occupied Palestine. And so one of the visits that I went on was to Jenin. Jenin is a prominent city in the north of the West Bank. Jenin and the area around it has historically, as well as today, been really important for agriculture. And so as we were driving in, we saw lots of fields, especially of tobacco, since Jenin is known for its tobacco. Unfortunately, since the occupation, it's been increasingly more and more difficult for farmers to grow food. And this is because, as we'll go into further later, the occupation controls all the water. So as you can imagine, inconsistent access to water makes it hard to farm. Also, inconsistent access even to their own land to tend to their crops that they're growing. And then once they're able to grow those crops, the unpredictability of being able to get the produce out to sell due to road blockages and checkpoints. Another notable feature of Jenin since the occupation is a very large refugee camp inside the city. When we were there, we were actually visiting with a project that's in the refugee camp, and we learned about how most people who are living in the refugee camp are from the rural coastal areas of occupied Palestine. So in the areas occupied in 1948, mostly villages around Haifa, but also Jaffa. And we're talking about how at first, when these people arrived into the Jenin refugee camp, it was a process for them to integrate with the rest of the city because the culture on the coast is a bit different actually than the culture in the inland. But now at this point, the families that live in this camp have been there for like 3-4 generations. This is like 3-4 generations of children who were born there and raised there. The kids go to the UNRWA, so the UN school, until they're young teenagers, and then they join the other kids of Jenin in the regular schools when they're a bit older. And so the existence of this camp and the influence and integration of the people from the camp with Jenin is one of the factors we were told that contributes to more militant resistance. So the Jenin Brigades is a like well-known brigades of militant resistance in the West Bank. And essentially the reason why the camp was one of the factors that led to this more militant resistance is because it's very hard to give into the ways that the occupation tries to normalize the situation and desensitize people if every day you're waking up to a surrounding that's a constant visceral reminder of displacement. And so because of this more militant resistance, it also means that the occupation has this excuse to go into Jenin and conduct much more frequent and brutal raids and invasions. Jenin experiences some of the most intense invasions across the West Bank. This is generally common in cities in the north. You can see in these pictures just the level of destruction to civilian infrastructure. This is as we're walking towards the camp. You can see that they tore up the roads with tanks. You can see that businesses have been bombed. You can see in this picture to the right that the IOF soldiers leave spray painted Stars of David to intimidate people and assert their dominance. And this is a form of collective punishment against the city for the Jenin brigades. So next slide.
Maybe
Israeli master plan started to be activated. It's called Jerusalem 2020. The whole idea of Jerusalem 2020 that they want to get rid of the Palestinian population by balancing the population, 70% Jews and 30% Palestinians. And to do so, the wall was one of the tools to make this demographic vision a reality. So they built the wall around Jerusalem. They annexed the area that they wanted to keep control on, and the areas that they want to push Palestinian to, they made it part of the Jerusalem municipality, but it's behind the wall. So me as a Jerusalemite who is Palestinian, I have a residency in Jerusalem that they can take it from me anytime, and I can't afford living in Jerusalem because it's very expensive, so I find refuge in these areas. This is the wall. Yeah, we always need to remember that the wall is a system. It's not a wall like a two-dimensional element. It have all these structures of bypass roads, highways, tunnels, towers. So the wall is just to wrap this up in one word. We call it the walls.
times I've done that.
Oh shit. There's so much traffic on the other side. Holy shit.
You mean going the other direction?
Yeah.
Leaving Ramallah, right?
Yes.
Yeah. People who work in Ramallah and live out.
And there is two exits now from Ramallah, this way and the other way to Jerusalem. We hope that will not be
So crowded.
too much traffic.
Israeli master plan started to be
Oops.
Caitlin, did you want to
So-
give a bit of context for that video before we?
Well, I think she provides the context. I mean, now we're getting into the whole sort of idea of the wall, and the sort of the apartheid system. And then in this next video, you can see this constant presence of these cement walls. Don't play it just yet. Everywhere, and these towers and these structures. And as this video shows, there's there's a very, there's a lot very rich Palestinian art culture, and some of it it takes inspiration from sort of concepts of escaping these walls. So next one.
Play the video or next?
Play video, sorry. Play video. Yeah, sorry. I think we need to go to the next slide.
Actually, this is my way back every day to my home. Like, this is my way back.
Let's see.
Oh wait, Nati,
Yeah,
could you go
let's-
back one slide?
Go back one slide to 13. Yeah. So well, this actually doesn't really require much introduction either, except to let you know that the person who's talking, Abdullah, was one of the videographers who was, we were taken all around to these different places, which we're talking about. And this is one of the videographers who grew up under the wall, and he talks about how he experienced the play.
Actually, this is my way back every day to my home. Like this is my way back every day. I'm coming to Ramallah because like they closed this DCO, so I have to came through Ramallah sort of Jalazon. Then I go to Dura, Anya Brood, between Derdeban, then to my village Burqa. So it's take more or less 40 minutes to 1 hour, and like before 7 October it was like just Burqa Derdeban between, and then came Burqa, it was 15 minutes maximum 20 minutes. Before second Intifada it was Burqa Ramallah direct, which is 7 minutes. So during time it became more harder to be from the village and to came to Ramallah, which is like most of the things we are doing in Ramallah, but like this is it's really changed, and it's really, I didn't understood all of this situation until when I start to go around and understood like it's not normal. But with time they normalize this checkpoint for us, because they give it to us like one by one. So we breathe it, like it's so tricky.
They do little by little, you adapt to it.
Exactly. So look at this. Like I remember it was without wall. This area it was without wall. Like this gray color, it's in between me and the sky. It's destroy me. Like it's every day I have to see this color and this block. It's blocked my many things, my mind, my thought, everything. Like this is so bad. Look. طب اسمع جبع مسكر في عند طريق ثاني. No, me neither. ليش نروح على الجبل؟ لا رح نمرق من الجبل. بس اذا حزمه سهل شيء ممتاز، نضل كابسين مش سهل شيء. تعرف وين بنروح؟ من عند مخماس في دخله على الشمال، ندخل منها وفي مستوطنه اظن اسمها الون. لا مش الون.
Go to the next.
Okay, so the slides and like the videos that we've seen so far are from the visits that we did that were in East Jerusalem or in the West Bank. To end this section, I just wanted to talk about the one visit that was actually in the 1948 occupied territories, or quote unquote Israel. Our friends in Palestine call it 48 for short, so as to not legitimize Israel by calling it Israel, but also speak to the realities of what it's like to live within the borders of that area. So historically, Lid has been an important caravan stop between Cairo and Damascus. It's a very old city. Most of the old city center was built during the Mamluk period, but unfortunately, most of it has also been destroyed under the guise of quote unquote development. While we were there, we were mainly learning about how the Nakba is not something that just happened in 1948. It's an ongoing event. And so this slow destruction of the infrastructure of the Palestinian city of Lid is an example of that. We saw a road, for example, that was built during 2020 during the pandemic, and it paved over an old Ottoman bathhouse. And this is one example of how slowly that infrastructure is chipped away. These two pictures are also ways I want to highlight that the occupation erases the history of the Nakba and manipulates this historical memory. So the picture on the top is, again, part of the Old City Center. It is an area where after the Zionist paramilitaries took Lid in 1948, they forced 500 Palestinian individuals to stay in the city so that they would operate the railroad station that was nearby. But they didn't let them go back to their homes. They kept them in a ghetto that was in this exact site that you see in the picture. And today, not only is there nothing marking this history, but the square is called Peace Square. So you can tell that it's just a really disgusting twist of that history. In the picture below, you see there's this mosque. So this mosque was the site of a really horrible massacre 2 days after the city of Lid fell to the Zionists. So there was 300 people hiding in there. There were civilians, there was old people, there was women, men, children, and all of them were killed by a Zionist paramilitary brigade that threw an explosive in there. And those 500 people who were forced to stay, like I had said before in the picture above, they were forced to take these bodies out of the mosque and bury them. And not only is there nothing marking this atrocity at the mosque, but the square is actually named after the brigade that committed the massacre. And so it felt really important to have this experience showing what it's like for people, for Palestinians living within the 1948 occupied territories, just the level of gaslighting that they experience. And we talked to several people who grew up there, one of them being Tamer Nafer. I want to share a quote of what he said about his city of Lid. He was talking about it being a mixed city, about it being very diverse. And he said, quote, "It could have been a beautiful salad if the chef was not racist and fascist. That's why you always see beautiful pieces, but as a whole, it's an ugly thing." There's also somebody named Abed who came with us on this trip who has Israeli citizenship. Fortunately, none of the Palestinians with a West Bank ID could have come with us. And Abed was talking about how growing up he always heard Israelis talking about peace and freedom and justice using these same words as well. But when he grew up, he really realized that it had a very different meaning to what Palestinians meant by those words when they were using them. Cool. That's it for this slide. Next one. Oh, yeah, next slide. Thanks. So in this section, we want to briefly talk about some elements of apartheid that weren't covered in the previous videos, and that it might help to have context for the following videos. So many of these elements came up in our experience there, as well as in stories from our Palestinian friends. Next slide. So arguably one of the most important ones is the policy that divides the West Bank into areas A, B, and C. As you can see from this graphic, the majority of the West Bank is actually Area C, and this dictates how, which areas are administered by who. So as you can see, Area C is actually entirely administered by the Israeli occupation. Area A is administered by the Palestinian Authority, and Area B is a mix. And so it was the occupation that decided whether an area is A, B, or C. This policy was actually notably also used in the 1948 occupied territories in the earlier stages of its occupation. So we know from history that this is a tool that aims for total occupation. We met with several rural projects and villages in Area C and learned about what this policy means on the ground for them. So for example, it's legally prohibited to build or have residential structures in these areas, and this leads to the erasure of entire villages via housing demolitions. It also means that people on the ground are subject to a lot more violence from settlers because settlements are much more common in Area C, and it's under the complete jurisdiction of the occupation, which pretty much never holds them accountable for the settler violence. And even though this map looks like Area A is administered by the Palestinian Authority, in fact, it's places in Area A, such as Ramallah, for example, can still be subject to raids and invasions by the IOF whenever. So even Area A is not free from Israeli occupation. So I already spoke a bit about how housing demolitions happen in Area C, but even beyond the West Bank, in Jerusalem, and even in 48, housing demolitions are a tool also used for displacing Palestinians, just, with a different policy as an excuse. So for example, in Lid, Palestinian, or as the Israelis call it, quote unquote, Arab neighborhoods are destroyed because they don't have urban planning maps. But we see in contrast that Jewish neighborhoods of recent Jewish immigrants don't have urban planning maps later either, and they're given a lot of leniency to get time to apply for those planning maps, which a Palestinian neighborhood would never get. Next slide. Thanks. So again, we already talked about the wall as a system. You can see all these checkpoints here. Another small thing I just want to mention is driving through the checkpoints. Cars that are registered in Jerusalem or in 1948 have yellow license plates, whereas cars that are registered in the West Bank have white license plates. So that makes it really easy for them to profile at checkpoints. It also makes it easy for settlers to profile when driving through settlement heavy areas. And obviously cars with white license plates get rocks thrown at them or even are shot at because they know it's a Palestinian car from the license plate. Next slide. Thanks. So in this video, we hear more about another aspect of apartheid, which is water rationing.
Saying that water in these areas, حتى most of the West Bank to be honest, comes only 2 times a week, 2 days a week, because the water resources are managed by the Israelis, and even now it was cut like 40% since what it was before the 7th of October. And that's why people put a lot of water tanks on the roofs of their houses. Like each family at least needs 2 tanks to maintain water for the whole week. Saying that water in these...
Next slide. So what this slide shows you is an example of water rationing. That little green area is an area where Israelis are cultivating and they get water. The areas around it are Palestinian. Next slide. Oh, this is this was a really fun part of our trip. We were invited to Aqaba by the Arab Educational Forum, of which there is one. Hopefully, more members will show up and be able to talk to us at the end of the presentation. Hiba is here today with us. She's the smiling lady on the right-hand side, 4 people in. The Arab Education Forum does a number of different kinds of projects, and one of the things that's very important to their ideas is the idea of mujawara. And the mujawara is a group of people who gather together. A small community is formed, and people learn and teach each other, and make food together, and basically hang out and learn from each other. It's an educational model. This is what we did in the second part, that's it. Next slide. We're going to talk about the settlements and the settlers. I just wanted to mention that now we're in the country, right? We're in the country. We go by villages, but this is an area that has been settled for, there's some ruins from the Canaanite period. It's a very beautiful land with a deep history.
And the videos that you're going to see in this section are from the Mujawara and are all taking place around Aqaba in the rural north of the West Bank.
Next slide.
My name is Wael Abdulrahim Kot. I'm a lawyer and legal advisor working for Jerusalem Legal Aid and the Human Rights Center based in Ramallah in Jerusalem. Sometimes we need to go through this Israeli approach and the Israeli system and the Israeli court in order to use our remedies here within the international mechanisms for protecting human rights. The United Nations mechanism, or even the judicial mechanism that we can approach now.
The Israeli judicial mechanism.
Yes, we start with the Israeli, then we go. But the Israeli judiciary is not encouraging at all. It's really disappointing and frustrating, especially when it comes to settler violence and trying to achieve legal accountability against settlers who carry out their attacks in the presence of Israeli police and soldiers in many cases. But then we receive this case closer by the Israeli police at the end of the day. And this is well documented by Palestinian organizations and Israeli organizations, actually. We are surrounded by Yitzhar settlement and Bracha settlement, which considered one of the most violent settlements in West Bank, actually. And I witnessed personally, actually, many attacks by them. And the last one was just 2 days ago when they come and burned a lot of olive trees in my village. And this takes place in daily basis, actually, against Madama, Burin, Asira, Hawara. It's one settlement and an increasing number of violent settlers who participate in these attacks. But we are facing zero accountability.
And you can't respond because then they just come again to you.
It's really risky even to stand up and try to defend your homes. 2 days ago, they arrived. They wanted to burn many houses. Actually, it's documented. They wanted to burn 3 houses which were close to the settlement, but then they burnt a high number of olive trees. Actually, then they were like they went back to the settlement, and this happens in daily basis. Actually, not only here, but in the whole West Bank. Maybe south of Nablus is one of the hottest area in terms of settler violence and army attacks against Palestinians. This takes place in daily basis. This is what we witness and see every day here. It's frustrating, really, and sometimes we face problems and challenges to convince any victims to go and file and report the settlers who attack them, because of the lack of trust in this the whole system. And we have documented many cases where the victims who reported the settlers who attacked them, they used to work in Israel with permit, and then after they filed the complaints to the Israeli police, they lost their permits.
Next slide. You can play it. In this one of our hosts of the Mujawara, Hamza, describes the evolution of one of the settlements that is right above his village.
There are 4 outposts surrounded Yanun village. This is the first one. Hamza, ايش اسمائهم بس؟
جفعات أرنون.
جفعات أرنون.
77737.
777.
And this way جفعات عولم.
جفعات عولم هذا one.
اتمار.
اتمار the biggest one.
وجدعنين.
جدعنين.
المستوطنة اتمار الأساسية أنشأت في 84. المستوطنة الأساسية في الجبال الورا. أخذت أراضي من يانون عورتة. بعدين بلشت تتوسع، أخذت أراضي عقربة، بيت فوريك، يانون عورتة. في 98 اجى ضابط متقاعد في الجيش الاسرائيلي اسمه افريران، وعمل مستوطنه بؤره زراعيه سماها تلال العالم، جفعات عولم. وله مقابله مشهوره بقول: انا الامبراطور حيث يصل البسطاري الدوله ستمد لي الخدمات كهرباء وماء. هاي مزارعه على امتداد عشرات الدنومات على قمم الجبال. هسه بنطلع فوق على امتداد عشرات جمع حوله كل المتورطين بقضايا جنائيه اللي ما لهم مش حدا، الزعران، وبلش يشكل اول عصابات يعني متطرفه في منطقه الضفه الغربيه، وصاروا يعتدوا على يانون. في 2000 اجبروا كل اهالي يانون على مغادره يانون باتجاه عقربه. اعتدوا على كبار السن، قلعوا عين واحد، قتلوا هاني بني جابر في الجبل هون، ضربوا اللي بجدوا زيتون، كسروا ايدين ناس انكسرت روسها. كان في اعتداء يوم خزقوا تنكات الميه، فجروا السخانات الشمسيه، كل يوم في اعتداء. والقريه اخليت بشكل كامل لمده اسبوعين، لم يبقى فيها اي عربي. نشطاء من حركه السلام ومتضامنين اجانب والاي بي بي اي اجوا اقاموا في يانون ورجعوا الناس ووفروا، حاولوا يحموا وجود الناس في يانون، كلوا كتله وشلحوهم ملابسهم وسرقوا امتعتهم المستوطنين، وتعرضوا كمان لما يتعرضوا الفلسطينيين.
He was referring to a group of settlers, very violent extremist settlers who started from this area to expand in their attacks in the whole West Bank. He was referring from the period 1998 to 2002.
بعدين بدأنا نشهد ظاهرة تدفيع الثمن وفتية التلال في كل الضفة الغربية. بلشوا في يانون وامتدوا جنوبا حتى مسافة رياضة. بعدها عملوا هاي البؤرة اللي هي بتقسم يانون التحتة ويانون الفوقة. فهاي البؤرة جفعات أرنون.
We can go with our ships to there to feed them.
There used to be regular volunteers from a church. They called EAPBI in Yanun, and in some cases they documented some attacks, and we used this documentation in our legal work. And I remember Rashid, we took Rashid to Jordan when an international fact-finding commission came from UN the United Nations, and they were prohibited to enter to Palestine. So they held the hearings in Amman. So I went there, me and Rashid, and we gave this briefing about Yanun, I remember. And we used some materials documented by the internationals who used to stay here for few weeks. So the security situation is not encouraging for them to come anymore.
Okay, I think we can just play the video.
8 months, the settlement come to Yanun. When Rashid go with his son out the house, then they come 7 settlements. They take the gun, put him in his head, and a small gun to
Stomach.
with his gun. With the dog attack his wife and children.
The dog?
Dog, yes. The settlement have a big dog.
Here it's illegal, systematic attacks by settlers against the community, and a failure of the Israeli police to implement the law and achieve the legal accountability against the settler who attacked the community here. We have been talking for long about Yanun. Unfortunately, the situation is getting worse and worse. It's the question of the occupation. It's the question of the apartheid system here in the occupied territory, in the occupied Palestine. And I believe the best solution is to end the occupation, full stop. We believe in that, and we have to support any effort serve this goal for us as Palestinians, to practice the self-determination for us, to practice the resistance, which is lawful for us to use any mean of resistance, not to condemn the victims and just keep watching those criminals who attack us in the midday and the midnight and no one saying anything about it. Simply.
يلا مستوطنين يصرفوا الغنم لبين البيوت هان بين الدول.
ايش ياخذوا من بين البيوت؟
الغنم بيجيبوا الغنم تاعاتهم بين البيوت.
اللي هم تاعاتكم الغنم؟
لا مستوطنين.
غنماتهم.
غنم مستوطنين
عشان يجمعوا الغنمات مع بعض.
يعني من 7 أكتوبر وجاي زادت المشاكل ومعاناة الناس زادت هنا. صار يحطوا لنا حواجز بين عقربة ويانون يمنعوا أي واحد يفوت يانون، حتى إحنا اللي معانا هويات يانون بقول لك ارجع. بيجوا في الليل بيلفوا بين البيوت هنا استفزاز، في النهار على طرطونات. الساعة 12 الساعة 1 بيجي في السيارات برضه بصير يزمر بين البيوت، وقف باب الدار وصير يزمر يستفز فيك مشان تطلع في الليل، مشان يستفردوا في الواحد يعني. اللي ما يستمر وقف هنا. زمر مرتين 3 4 25 هنا
25 شخص
من 250 25 من 250. انت بتحسب هالساعة في 25 عيلة تقريبا من يانون ساكنين في عقرب، واحسب كل عيلة كم عيلة طلعت اخوة منها.
الجبل عندنا في الحرم بجوز فيه 7 يحيى والاستاذ نمر واخوته واولاد.
هو النمر احسب كم عيلة طلع اولاده 5 6 كل واحد صار عيلة. هو قسما بالله مرة ايام مش يوم 2 يعني اني انام حشاك وانا لابس في اجري.
Millions of dollars have been spent to help such villages in Palestine, and the majority has been confiscated by the Israeli civil administration or damaged by settlers. So I think first we need to protect such aid for the farmers here in any marginalized area in West Bank. How to protect? It's the question of the military occupation and the role of international community and the EU, for example. They spend a lot of millions of dollars every year, and easily they are like confiscated by the so-called the Israeli civil administration. So we need legal protection. We need political real intervention to protect. This is our duty and the international duty in such a situation in general.
I have a question.
I know that this might be like something, like a dream after what we have seen in Gaza and the international role in such crimes that are taking place in Gaza. But still, we cannot forget our basic rights here in West Bank. This is what I've been saying to any community I meet in Area C or in West Bank in general. The people start to think and compare themselves in the genocide that's taking place in Gaza. But no, it's our right to live, to practice our life, our style of life as a farmer here, for example, and to access to our land easily without any, and even to practice our right to use the legal approach to protect our.
Okay, that got a little bit cut off. Of course, this was filmed in July, and things have gotten dramatically worse in the West Bank since then. Hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about that. And one of the things that happened, as you all may have heard, is in the town of Beta, which we're going to be showing a short video about next, is where they have regular demonstrations there. From what I understand, they don't even march anymore because they're so dangerous. Mostly they pray, and Beta became, heard about by Americans because that woman, the Turkish American woman, got assassinated by a sniper, and that was in Beta. That was this town that we're talking about. Of course, many Palestinians have gotten killed there before, but in the Western media, we only hear about it when it's an American. But the next video is talking about the conflict in this area and the outpost that's creating most of the conflicts. Play video.
Twail village, which is nearby one, has been demolished كم مرة؟
37 مرة
37 times.
Oh, wow.
Since
بيشمل المسجد وشبكة الكهرباء.
This included the electricity and water networks, and even the mosque was demolished.
يعني لما مدوا المية كانوا يشتغلوا يوسف واقف على براكب وهذولك بيمدوا مسير بس يجي يجيب يوسف.
That's weird. It's a sound from a different video.
Okay,
Here we go. That was an odd glitch. Do you see the outposts on the top of the hills, how they're positioned themselves? Geography.
They are talking about this settlement in the top of the mountain and how the settlers start putting flags on the road to the settlement to take control of all the mountain from the area B, the end of the Palestinian houses, to the top of the mountain where they put their caravans.
This gentleman also, he lost his son. 12 persons were killed here in this area, in this peaceful protest against this outpost.
When was the protest?
This one started at the beginning of 2021, once the settlers gathered here and started to initiate this outpost. It wasn't the first time. They tried to build a settlement here in 2013, 16, 2018, and all time they failed to consult. They failed to provide legal framework to establish the settlement. And until the government just came this time and started to legalize this outpost. As you know, it's agricultural land. It's a private-owned land for Palestinian from Beta and nearby 3 villages.
I own 6 dunums there for me and my family, my brother. Every year I used to go and farm it and collect the harvest. I have trees there. Only just 2 years ago I couldn't go because they prevent us. They put tents. They put tents at the beginning. We complained to the civil administration, They remain for like a few days, then they evacuate them. After this, they came again, they put tents and they evacuate them. Since 3 years, they came and they put, they came in, a huge number. Settlers, they put tents and mobile houses at the same time. The people here in the village start, do activities. They come, burn tires, make the smoke go towards them, and use, laser lights to disturb them, and also, a horn, big horn, would be, we go also to the law side, lawyers. We offered our
Evidence.
Exactly that we prove we are owns this land and it's belong to us. Since a few days, Smotrich, offer it to his government, and I think they agree to make it legal settlement over there. That's why we are here today, because also last Friday, the people start in my village, Beta, do the activities again. Some clashes happen here, they burn a lot of trees because of the tear gas that they are shooting. So this is the situation in general.
The cost of this outburst is really high. There are almost 6,000 Palestinians were wounded in this protest.
And how many were
There
killed?
are 12 killed. Only in 2 years. Unfortunately, 1,050 something, they have disability, and at least 8 persons lost one of their eye. They were shot by snipers, and it's really costly experience. It's really popular, peaceful resistance here.
Okay, next.
Soil village, which is nearby one, has been demolished.
Yeah, let's go. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the resistance, and in this case, you hear Hamza talk about their reconstruction efforts, which I think is really typical of a certain kind of Palestinian determination and love of the land and the place that they're willing to struggle for. Play video.
Soil village, which is nearby one, has been demolished كم مرة؟
37 مرة.
37 times.
Oh, wow.
Since
بيشمل المسجد وشبكة الكهرباء
this included the
والمية.
electricity and water networks, and even the mosque was demolished.
يعني لما مدوا المية كانوا يشتغلوا، يوسف واقف على المفرق براكب وهذولك بيمدوا مسير، بس يجي جيب الجيش برن عليهم يوسف بيشتغلوا في المعدات، فكل يوم يمدوا مترين مية.
So they are facing the army, they are facing the civil administration, which are formal bodies, and they are facing also the settler violence.
في حوارة مستوطن قبل سنوات أطلق النار على شاب من بيته، فيوسف ضابط الإسعاف راح يسعف الشاب، فوقف السيارة في نص الشارع مشان يسعف الشاب. الجيش اعتقل يوسف وحبسه لمدة شهر لأنه أعاق عملية هروب المستوطنين بعد ما قتلوا الشاب.
Okay. Oops, that was a note to myself. All right. So this next section will be about various examples of cultural resistance that we visited. Next slide. Okay, I think we can just go ahead and play this.
Occupation doesn't just take land and doesn't just steal places and what do we have in these places, but also they try to make us forget what we used to do or what history do we have and what history does the land hold. One of Safia's work is to maintain this living mythologies and how we can also continue the rituals and the practices we used to do. It is said that because the holy man, the father of eyes, Abu al-Inayn, protects the land on the mountain, and he preserves the trees, especially this tree. And it is said that the people are also scared of this because he protects, they can't destroy. How old it is? More than 1,000 years. Working on the farm goes between working with the locals and working with different farms around Palestine also that work with the same strategies we work on, like what is good to plant beside what and how they can help each other.
Yeah.
So the next video is a storyteller, which there are many, many brilliant storytellers in the Palestinian culture. And this talks a little bit about that. Next slide, play video.
So siraj means the candle or the lantern, صح? Where we want to put it in a place to light, right? And we seems trying our best to light a place where it was forgotten, where it was like people left it for many reasons. You are here in Area C, which representing 60% of the whole West Bank. Area C means that the area under Israeli military law. If you go to this law, that means anytime the Israelis can come, soldiers just can stop us working or do anything. So what we are doing in this storytelling center, do you think? And we call that as library, and it is a library. And we say a library, it's about books and people. Library, it's about you, who invents those books, who read those books, a human being, right? So we empower the person, and we call them hakawatiyin, a storyteller. Storyteller in Arabic means for the man hakawati, for the lady hakawatiya. Why? Why we think about our people, our partners, our even audience as storytellers? Because we think and we do believe of the power of storytelling in the Palestinian society and such areas like that where we are right now. And we tell stories in order to root, to strengthen and heal. We have been opening libraries in 15 locations, and in such locations like refugee camps, villages, and other places where we gather all libraries together with one event. For example, the National Storytelling Festival. That's in Ramadan. And Ramadan, you know, it's in our tradition that people used to sit, gather, and listen to each other's stories. And just like the idea of that storytelling festival, to refresh this habit back, but consciously in public. So the two tiny things we did in our work, the ladies in the past, our ladies, my grandmother, your grandmother, and our ancestors, especially ladies, used to tell their stories in private. The only little tiny things we did, we said ladies has to tell their stories in public. And like my grandmother, when she used to tell stories, she was, maybe could you go back to her, do you know what the story was about? And she said like, about lady and man. Okay, what's the meaning of it? Maybe she don't know, and she did not know. So the idea of the Storytelling Center is to analyze, to collect stories, to analyze them, to search them, you know, to see the behind the scene of the stories. So about that, it's not about telling a story or copying or just speaking about heritage. No, it's more about analyzing, reflecting, criticizing even, and encourage people to.
Yeah, well, that got
Seems
cut
like
off
it got cut off a bit.
a little bit, but yeah, I think she got most of what she was saying there. Just talking about encouraging people to tell stories and analyze them.
So another project that we visited, and now we're kind of back in like the first half of the trip, is the Freedom Theater. So these are the folks who hosted us when we were in Jenin, and they are a community theater. Again, they operate in the refugee camp, and they have programs and put on performances that help youth especially make sense of life under the occupation. So an example of this is they do Agosto Bowls Playback Theater. I'm not sure if some of y'all are familiar with that, but basically it's like people go into their communities and gather stories from their community members that they then turn into a performance or a play that they that they put on for the community itself. And they also make adaptations of popular Palestinian works, such as The Little Lantern or Letter from Gaza both by Ghassan Kanafi. And unfortunately, most of this visit was a lot of the conversations we had was around the difficulty of doing this work. Most of the people in this organization are actually in administrative detention right now, so being held without trial by the occupation in prison. And they're also having a lot of difficulties with funding because between the Palestinian Authority, who doesn't give them a lot of money, and also the outside funding that they receive largely from Europe, but with a lot of stipulations, for example, needing to condemn armed resistance or vet all of their community members to make sure they have no ties to armed resistance. It's very dehumanizing, these stipulations to get funding. And also the bombing and vandalization of the theater. As you can see, this is right outside the theater. It's been destroyed by the invasion of the IOF. So, but nevertheless, they're still doing their summer camp. When we visited in July, they said that they were looking for a different place to host their summer camp for the kids later that summer. So they're still doing their thing. Next slide. I also want to highlight the organization that hosted us in Lid, Zokrot. So they gave us the walking tour, which is how we learned a lot about what I was sharing beforehand. And they're an organization that includes both Palestinians and Jews in 48, and they're promoting the Palestinian right of return via research, archiving, and education around the ongoing Nakba. So as I already said, this looks like walking tours, but also gathering of testimonies and making public all these primary sources around the Nakba. Next. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. So one of our hosts in the Mujawara was Samer, who hopefully will show up today. Hamza had mentioned to us that even in all these little villages that we went to in the country, these small villages, like all the kids here have been to the university, and we were like really surprised. And we're like, how does that work? Because most places in small rural towns, a lot of kids don't. So this was what Samer explained. Play a video.
Are having this sense of we are living as a community, we are not individuals. So if I have money and I'm sharing this money with other people from my village, I will get benefited also. I am just not giving them this because they could help another people, another generation of they feel like if he's feeding his son or his family.
So now we're entering a little section about agriculture. Oh, yeah, and I think Michelle, you're kicking this off.
Yes. So next slide. Thank you. So before we get into this section, I just wanted to highlight some of the traditional agriculture methods that we learned about, just because so many of the projects and people that we met with, as you can kind of already tell, we're working on bringing back these traditions. And I really think that they beautifully highlight the relationship between Palestinian peoplehood and culture with their lands. And so picture number 1, as you can see on the left, is an example of companion planting. And so companion planting is when you put 2 plants together that mutually benefit each other. This is something that indigenous cultures across the world use, and Palestine is no exception. Picture number 2 is a plant called kolbeze. I don't know, Hiba, if I pronounced that correctly, but in English, it's called mallow, or known as cheeseweed. And this is a common plant that's foraged by Palestinians. So as you can tell, traditionally, it's always been a mix of cultivated agriculture and foraging, as well as nomadic herding when it comes to the Bedouins. So it's always been a mix of these different things. Kolbeze in particular is quite significant because it's keeping a lot of people alive in Gaza. A lot of people are seeking this plant to forage and eat because it's really high in nutrients, which is important given the famine that the occupation is creating there as part of the genocide. So picture number 3 is another example of indigenous agriculture there. It's a method to protect a newly planted seed from the sun as well as getting it more water. So 2 rocks are placed on either side of a seed that was recently planted underground. A third rock is placed propped on top of those 2 rocks to shade the seed, but also in the early morning, dew collects underneath that rock and drips additional water onto the seed. So I thought that was really awesome Palestinian technology. And number 4, of course, the terraces. This has already been mentioned. As Caitlin said, like they're really, really old terraces. The ones that you can see on the left that are more worn down and not being used anymore. I was told by my friend Saja that these are from the Canaanite era, 4000 BC, so that's 6,000 years ago. And then the ones you can kind of see on the right of the picture are the Roman to modern era terraces. So these are built from 60 AD all the way to the present. And many of the terraces that are still being used, such as these, were built, during the Roman era and are still being used communally, which is really awesome. Next slide. Okay, so in this part it's Saad Dagar, who is
I want to just make one little comment here, which is that the terraces, I don't think that we made it clear. The terraces are an agricultural technique which is used in many parts of the world to prevent erosion and to hold water. So they have this is their function, and they're you look at them, you're like, how the hell did they build these things without modern machinery? Because they're like, it's very intense and the land is very rocky. But they build them out of the rocks. So our next slide. We were really honored to have Saad Dagar as part of our Mujawara. And next slide, play video. Speaks for himself.
So I used to plow the land using the mule and horses. This is how I started my life. And then of course, I come from a peasant family. So my father and my mother and the whole village people were peasants and used to grow wheat in winter time, and we harvested in summertime. So I remember the whole season, how it was. We used to produce almost all our food. Wheat for us, barley and other fodder crops for animals. We used to produce fig and we also dried figs, grapes and raisin. so many things we used to produce. Beside, of course, the main crop was and still the olive oil. After school, I studied agronomy, so I'm an agronomist also. I was in Soviet Union, ex-Soviet Union, for 6 years, between 1985 and 1991, so during the Soviet time. Then I came back to Palestine and I started my work as an agronomist with a local NGO. And since 1996, I started to look for another way of farming where we can produce without any chemicals. I started by my own in the beginning. And I did some experiments in my parents' home garden. It was not a successful experience in the beginning. Yes, I failed several times to produce without chemicals. But I insisted on that. And the main reason why I took this path was an experience in Jenin area, actually. I visited once a farmer in Jenin area with my colleagues. And we visited him and we went to his field. He was a cucumber producer. He has greenhouses. And after that, maybe after three months, we had a meeting as a group of agronomists. and my colleague from Jenin area, from Jenin camp actually, and from a damage area. Yes. He came and he said, you know what happened to that farmer? I said, which one? He said, yeah, we visited him in Birkin. Birkin is a village close to Jenin city. I said, no, I don't know what happened. He said, you didn't read about the two boys who passed away? I said, yeah, you mean those boys who took poison, who took pesticide? He said, yes. He said, these two boys were his children. Yeah, one was 6 years old, and the daughter 7 years old. So what happened that they were with him in his farm, and he forgot, I can say, a packet of salt in the car, and his children went with some cucumber and they wanted to eat the cucumber with salt, so they merged it in salt and they ate it. In less than half an hour they passed away, both of them, because it was not salt, it was a very poisonous insecticide. When we were working as an extension workers, we went to the fields and we gave advices to farmers. We just went there and saw if there are some insects or diseases, and we just wrote a recipe for them. Okay, go and buy this pesticide. And I decided, no, I'm not working for these companies for free. Why should we promote their produce, their poisons actually? This is another reason. So when we started agroecology, I found that it is also a way to get rid of these companies which are controlling agriculture not only in Palestine but all over the world. And they are controlling the agriculture, and by controlling agriculture they are actually controlling our food. So I decided to stop that. And I see that agroecology is a way to free our people, our farmers, from these companies, and also to go towards food sovereignty, because food sovereignty is one of the main pillars for freedom. If you are not able to produce your own food, you cannot be free. And we see that, for example, now what the Zionist entity is doing in Gaza actually is trying to bring Gaza people into surrender by controlling food. So food sovereignty is the main pillar for political sovereignty. This is my opinion also.
So to just wrap it up, I wanted to bring up two examples of farms that are operating with this agroecology as resistance framework. We're actually both mentored by Saad. So the first one is Sleman on the left. Sleman farms on land that actually Palestinian and international protesters won back from a settlement by pushing and resisting for years. And so as you can see, they're right across from this illegal Israeli settlement. And they have farming and natural build courses to increase this knowledge in Palestine. And they also have a CSA where they distribute the food that they grow with these agroecological methods to the local community. The other example is Juna Farm on the right. Juna Farm is actually where we had our mujawara. This is Hamza's farm, who you can see here in this picture. And it's a really beautiful place. It's really amazing. Him and his father and his friends and other community members built this traditional houses out of like mud and straw and stones, where they host youth groups every week who come together and practice storytelling, as well as making food together from food that they grew on the farm. And it's autonomously funded by the community that's for. And they also participate in Saad's seed saving program, where essentially Saad has gone out into Palestine and collected a bunch of heirloom Palestinian varieties. And he gives these seeds to farmers 100% for free, but on 3 conditions. The first is that they grow them agroecologically, so with no pesticides. The second is that they plant those seeds and they seed the saves from the crops that they produce, and they give them the seeds back to him in twofold. And then the third is that they gift the seeds to other farmers who ask for it on the same 3 conditions. So yeah, I think that wraps it up.
Like we mentioned earlier, we have a guest. I think there's only one person currently here from the West Bank. And I think we're still processing everything that we have witnessed, and a lot of discussions have arose from this trip. But as you can see through this presentation, the deep fragmentation and dismemberment of the Palestinian territories. And for every location, like there's a story with it. So we was so blessed to have Kaylin, who's a videographer, who was able to capture a lot of all these videos in person from the people that we were able to visit. So all these videos were taken by Kaylin, and just really gracious for that, and just opportunity to be able to do that. But before we go into Q&A, I invite people to put questions on the chat regarding anything that you're hearing today. But I want to give the opportunity for a guest who's here today to share a little bit about who they are. And as you can see, as the continued fragmentation of Palestinian territories, there's still a lot of resistance. There's still a lot of like the constant need to live and to maintain that culture alive, and many forefronts, whether that be through arts, culture, or through agriculture. And Hiba, who when I first met her, was very, very capturing and very fell in love with her spirit. And I'm really blessed that you will be able to hear a bit about her story, and about the continued life that she brings, and maintaining the Palestinian culture alive and within her community, within her land. So I offer the space for Hiba to share some words and thoughts about this presentation, anything about what's happening currently in the West Bank, anything that you want to share with us. And then after that, we'll go briefly into answering some of the Q&A. So thank you.
I just wanted to add, Imwat, always so humble. She did the beautiful design of the PowerPoint, which is really quite lovely, and just wanted to make sure that got credited as well. All right, Hiba, take it away.
Hi, thanks for everything, really. Thanks for this intensive and impressive presentation. Really, I'm proud to accompany you, Michelle and Caitlin and Diamut. I'm Hiba from Arab Education Forum. I can summarize our aim in this institution to living wisely. And living wisely involves seeing a person as being composed of relationships, as what Samer said in one of videos, not as isolated individual. I mean relationship with others, with the place, with nature, with land, with society, and with collective memory. We are in Arab Education Forum, not an institution in the modern sense, except in relation our relation to the government institution, but rather living a social framework. And the difference lies in the fact that living frameworks are driven by a vision connected to life, whereas institutions, governments, universities, parties, international and local organizations are driven by goals, strategies, and plans. Actually, the situation in the West Bank has not changed from your visit, Michelle and Kellen. The situation is getting worse, worse and worse in the camps with daily arrest and local executions, land theft and killing people in Gaza in attempt to empty part of it. And as Mu'tan Abdullah said in one of your videos, during the time the distance became between villages and cities, the distance became smaller and smaller. They put us in a big siege here in West Bank either. And really the wall block our minds. And that's what I can say about the situation in the West Bank. We can talk more more about the situation, but it became escalated and worse day by day. Thanks.
Thanks, Hiba. I just have to tell this little anecdote about when we met Hiba. So she was sent to check us out since we're Americans, and Americans are so, the U.S. government is basically responsible in many ways for the genocide. So she was sent to make sure that we were the right kind of Americans. And she took us to old Ramallah, which is a very beautiful part of town, old part of the city. And there's areas where there's all these people sitting in tables and cafes, and there's cafes, like really nice cafes, but there's only men sitting out there. And she's like, come on, we're gonna go sit here. And she sat right down in the middle of all the terrace where we were the only women there. And she's like, yeah, I always do this, I always come and sit where the men are. And I was like, and then we were like, okay, this is our kind of person here. So I just had to tell that anecdote. So what kind of person, wonderful person, cool person Hiba is, and all the other people that we met there. And hopefully we'll get to hear from other people at some other time as well.
Should we open it up to Q?
Yes. Let's open it up to Q&A. Let's see. I'm looking at the questions here. Question by Katia Lara Olivas. How does your work and interconnectedness with the Zapatista open your mind to the injustices and oppression in Palestine? Why is the interconnectedness so important in these spaces and in our fight for liberation? Who would like to tackle that one? I mean, I can start. I'll start, but I'm sure you all have, the rest of you have things to say too. So I'll just give a little brief thing saying that, I think that there's a lot of parallels between the situation in Chiapas and with the Zapatistas and the Palestinian situation. The main one being the displacement and the genocide, the genocidal impulses constantly renewed of the governments. And also, as we sort of see in Ramallah, like the always on the edge of the sort of capitalist enterprises ready to take over. And I've heard, a lot of people talking about what the Israelis want to happen in Gaza after they move people out, and it's all these like big, corporate dreams, So I think, and then on the other side, the resistance, the powerful resistance of the people who live there and love the land, who've been there for centuries and more than centuries, and their relationship to nature, and how that contrasts with the settler colonial mentality. So that would be my response. Anybody else like to add to that? I think it's important that recognition is very important for us to understand, like what we're fighting and how we're how we're connected in this fight, since the interconnectedness is the important is part of the question. Anybody want to add? Imo, did you want to add something?
No, I guess I'm just thinking about we literally only had a month to prepare to go to this trip. It was very last minute. And I remember we meet once a month. I mean, no, we meet every other Monday. We've been doing that, our assemblies with the network Sexta Grietas. And when it was presented, I think it was interesting that myself and Kaylin, who have been more older in the organization, we have more flexibility. We said yes, but I was really there was no doubt or question from Padme and Michelle, like, yes, I'm ready to go to go right away. There was not, and it took us a month to really meet. We were meeting weekly to prepare about, just preparing in regards to security. We were also concerned. Many of us have never been to Israel. Kaylin has been there before to Palestine. But for myself, Pam and Michelle, it was her first time going there. So there was a lot of anxiety about what was going on, and also going there during the genocide and not knowing what to expect. And I just had to reflect that it was a bittersweet aspect of also coming back and knowing that we left a lot of people that we have connected behind. So really blessed to have Hiba here and many people that we met. And I think that I'm still processing that. And the aspect of it was difficult to leave. Myself, I had a difficulty leaving. I also was interrogated for various hours just to leave the country. Question why who paid for me to be there, if I was some form of a spy or infiltrator somehow. But we all had different challenges within the different checkpoints. I was constantly asked for my passport, even though I had a U.S. passport. But I was within the people I was writing to the different communities. I was one of the only folks of color from the international community. So I was constantly harassed or questioned about my identity. So there's still a lot of things being processed in regards to that. But yeah, I think because as walking along with Zapatismo and accompanying the Zapatistas, it felt like a responsibility to go. I myself speaking, it felt like a responsibility to go if this opportunity was being presented, if this invitation was out. So we just really blessed that there were many of us willing to jump on board to do that. And we're also very blessed that we were able to make those relationships and continue to connect more with more Zapatista and CNI communities in relationship to Palestinians struggles. And that's something that as Sexta Grietas, as a network, we're that bridge. And we're hoping to be able to continue to bridge those relationships. So even though we have built those relationships and been blessed to be able to go and come back, I think the most important aspect is how to connect Indigenous communities currently in Palestine, also with Indigenous communities in Mexico, with the work that we do down south as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Ima. I just want to add something very briefly that I felt like I was missing, and it's this whole like individualism versus community aspect to it that the Zapatistas share with the traditional Palestinian values, which we talked about. I think that's absolutely key in in terms of like any hopes for this world getting any better. It's kind of grim looking right now, and also very, very strong connection between the indigenous Zapatista communities and the traditional Palestinians. And also, I just want to add that ever since my trip to Palestine, and then shortly after that, I went to Chiapas. And when I came back, I got singled out by Homeland Security and interrogated. It wasn't scary or anything, but it was just annoying. But I have no doubt that is a result of the trip to Palestine and the formidable Israeli intelligence services. So there's a couple more questions here. Let's see. Seed saving practices. Michelle spoke to that a little bit. Do you have something to add, Michelle? the question is talking about agroecology resistance. Would love to know more about seed saving practices farmers participate in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the one that I can only think of one that I remember that we heard about while we were there, and that's this box called again, I'm like embarrassed with Hiba here hearing my bad pronunciation, but kabia. I don't know if that's right, but it's like a box that's made of mud and straw. And like when it dries, it keeps it really cool inside. And so we were told that historically that's been used to keep seeds good and also keep grains, which I guess are seeds, fresh as well. So that's the one thing that I remember. And then I can't remember what was the other part of the question. Oh, here it is. Okay. As a way to preserve agriculture, how it's passed down to younger generations. I actually think like while we were there, we heard a lot about how it's been a really big struggle passing it down to younger generations. The farm manager at Omslemen, Yara, was telling us about how like it's really hard to convince young people to continue these agricultural traditions because of the perception that like you're not going to have a lot of opportunities, like you should go to school and pursue academia. And yeah, just like the idea of like progress, you know, of like farming being something of the past. But a lot of the projects that we met with, including Omslemen, Juno Farm, Sakya, are like trying to bring back the recognition of the importance of these traditions. And so those projects are really doing that amazing work. I don't know if Hiba, if you want, is Hiba still here? Oh, she is.
No, she left.
Okay. Dang, okay. I was wondering maybe she wanted to add something, but yeah, that's from what I remember.
Just to add to briefly to what you're saying, Michelle. I mean, I think this problem of getting young people interested in agriculture, well, there's a particular problem in Palestine because you know, it's so hard to do it because you're so you know, the encroachment of the settlers and all the different laws against you. But the problem of engaging young people in agriculture is almost worldwide, I think. There's many, I mean, I've talked to a lot of people in Chiapas, you know, who are like, they can't get their kids to get into it, you know, or only 1 out of 4 kids. So it is something of an issue, I think.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. It's like on top of this thing that the whole world is like dealing with of like these forces of liberalism and like capitalism is like the occupation in Palestine. Like even the farm manager, Umsuman Yara, you just reminded me, Caitlin, that like when we asked her, like, are you trying to get your own farm one day? She was like, yeah, I'm trying to start my own farm, but not in Palestine. And we were like, dang, like, why is that? And she's like, it's just too hard. Like it's not worth it. Like I'm not willing to put that level of energy just to potentially have my farm taken from me at any second. Yeah, and so thank you for bringing up that the occupation is also a big reason that discourages young people from pursuing agriculture.
So next question from Brian Hancock. Thank you for your time. Do y'all have any insights on what practices of international solidarity are missing or should be more focused on? Anybody?
Dang, I wish Hiba was still here to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I will say that I do remember many people in Palestine were just, I mean, the Palestinians are so appreciative of everything that we do. You know, the marches, and they were particularly appreciative of the student occupations. So yeah, if we can get an occupation movement going again, it's pretty fucking hard. Excuse my language. It's pretty hard right now because of like they've just come down so hard on all the campuses. I don't know. I hope that I hope that the students will find some way around all these impediments to organizing. But everything we do matters to them. I mean, it doesn't seem to matter to our government. It seems at this point, seems to be very little we can do to get really any change in policy. But we still have to keep going. And it really matters to our compas in Palestine.
I think to add to that, I feel like it's like not so much like certain things are missing or should be focused on more. I think just in my opinion, it feels like it's as long as things are continuing, you know, like it's more important that we continue than we think of like what are we not doing? It's like like let's all continue doing what we're already doing and able to do, and just make sure people don't forget that this has been going on for like 100 years.
And I think also to add, I think I'm also like feeling this level of anxiety of the sense of just recording or documenting the story. So I think it's also important to be able to project the different Palestinian voices. So I felt this is just one report back that we're doing as Sexta Grietas, but there's few other delegations that have been able to go during this genocide. There's a lot of doctors have been able to actually go enter into Gaza. So I think being able to be able to project those voices that are out there and being able to make space for them and to create more discussions for these things like these. But I think we have to be more. I feel like we have to do better in projecting those voices and as much as we can. So I think there's also a sense of responsibility to be able to know, and I'm really grateful for the videos that were taken, because I think, God willing, being able to still be able to see many of our friends that were able to visit, and have the opportunity to go back to Palestine. So just thinking out loud about just all these different documentation, all these different stories, all these different videos. The journalists themselves have risked their lives and being able to project those stories. Like how do we honor or do justice to project those voices, and how to do it in a dignified way. And I think that's something that we're still learning, and just thinking about that. Thank you.
Okay.
It looks like there is one more question, actually.
Yeah, there is one more question. I was just trying to thinking a little bit more about this whole problem of like, so much of the problem, there's so much anti-Arab prejudice in this country. It's really just absolutely shocking. I keep running across it in unexpected forms, So representing Palestinian voices and having people understand this Palestinian culture is like, people are so ignorant, it's just like, oh yeah, Palestinians took over the Israeli land. I just hear this all the time. And it's so shocking to the level of ignorance of the American population around this issue. So whatever we can do to convince people or to show people otherwise, this is a good thing. Let's see, the last question here is there a strong nonviolence resistance movement there that works in tandem with the armed resistance of organizations like Hamas? Is there any scope for nonviolent resistance to succeed against Israel and the very violent IDF? Roberto Hernandez responds, who's a fellow Grietas member, the nonviolent resistance has equally been subject to sniper violence, massacres, not to mention murders of journalists and so on, which is why, in my humble opinion, it has become a moot point. Yeah, I think that's a good response. We obviously don't have anything to really say about the armed resistance. Our focus was a cultural resistance, and I think that form, that's not gonna, for it to succeed against Israel and the IDF, like that's who knows what's gonna make that happen, right? But in terms of the importance locally, the cultural resistance, as we've talked about, is very important. And as Roberto says, like all these things have been tried, and they always get responded to with intense violence. One thing I've been wanting to mention is that we've been referring to the Israeli so-called defense forces. This is a little bit of cultural resistance too, and linguistically, is that we refer to them as Israeli occupation forces, the IOF, not the IDF. Michelle's got her hand up.
Hi, sorry, my dog is being crazy, but I also wanted to say that like it is like extremely dangerous to even insinuate that like you have any kind of involvement or collaboration with militant resistance in occupied Palestine. So like that's not something that like we would be privy to going there as well. Like the level of repression, like there's people who are thrown in administrative detention, again, put in prison without any trial for like posting a meme on social media that even refers to armed resistance, like things like that. So like yeah, like um yeah, because of that, it's not really a question we can answer.
Thanks. Michelle, you want?
Yeah, no, just to add to that too, but it's just to be also, that was also a question I had going in regarding, but I think we went as a delegation of international, also cultural institutions, and my ignorance in the aspect of just, I thought that was more like a facade to be able to get into Tel Aviv, to Israel. And when we got there, it was a gathering of Palestinian assembly of assemblies. We met amazing cultural workers and other people resisting in other institutions in the European institutions. But it was a genuinely gathering of cultural institutions and grassroots that we were walking, and it somehow felt like our network, we were the most resistant or activist network that was present within this gathering. But our voice had a lot of value in the sense that we really provided why we were invited was like, how do we organize through Zapatista practices? So we have a gathering of a room of all these different institutions, a lot of Palestinian cultural institutions, grassroots, nonprofit. They're trying to really preserve their own histories and identities, knowing that it can easily be wiped out. So I think it was a need of this delegation to really preserve. How do we partner with people that sympathize and support the Palestinian movement to be able to help us or strategize strategically how to preserve these memories, these stories, and these cultural institutions that have been operating there for generations. So there was an actual like question out there, and within this whole experience of going to these different cities was trying to navigate collectively how to answer to this response. And I just share that because what I did ask and realize, like, why is there not much discussion about armed resistance within this space? And I think, to Michelle's point, it's extremely dangerous just to have any Palestinian people that we met to talk in that way or to record. So anything that was said more privately, it was just people. There is a desperation of young activists, young artists wanting to just drop what they're doing and go fight as well. So I just share that there is this desperation of young Palestinians wanting to respond to that, and also tired of watching their own people being massacred. So there's a lot of internal individual tensions and trying to deal with this, but it wasn't openly discussed to anybody. And it was something that was very, very private for people's protection. And just also us honoring that, knowing also how risky it is to even ask these things very openly. So we also understood as so-called Americans going there to be just literally just going there to really listen and observe what is it that's really happening here, because it was our first time there. So just sharing that we learned very right away what not to ask and what not to say in that respect, to be able to protect. And it's not for our own safety; it was the protection and security of the Palestinian people that were like literally also risking and showing their faces, as you see in the films, to show us what's really happening within their territories, and in the most dignified way. Thank you.
Oh yeah, it's speaking to a little bit tangential to what Iman was saying, but there's this many places. I mean, I think at least 5 places I went to. They were doing archival work. They were preserving. They're doing interviews. Pictures, archiving. the Palestinian history, because of the fear of the history being lost. That's a real like important drive. When we just didn't happen to have anything about that here. Let's see. The next question is there any way to directly support Juna Farm and other on the crew? Well, if it ever becomes possible, go visit. Because we inaugurated their gathering space. But we'll ask our friends there, Hamza and Hiba, if there's that I'm sure they'll be very happy to hear that this question came up, and we'll ask, and maybe you should throw up your email, and somebody can capture it when you guys can get the email of this person.
Juna Farm and a lot of these other projects that you mentioned also have like a social media presence. So Juna Farms is JUNA _farm_. If you want to give Hamza a follow.
Okay, Roberto says, on the question of solidarity, what do you see are the prospects of the Bernie Sanders bill to stop sending arms to Israel? Somebody want to take that one on? Or what do you think the prospects are, Roberto?
He can't speak. I'll say just read.
You could type.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you can type. I said read the remaining questions, and then since we have only like 4 minutes,
okay,
and then loud stats. Yeah.
From Mario Galvan, another Sexta Grietas member, aside from the political and religious aspects of Zionism, what role does racism play in the situation? As you were there, did you make a connection between racism in U.S. and Palestine? Do you think this is a factor in the Zapatista struggle in Mexico as well? I mean, definitely it's a huge, what role does it play? I mean, it plays a huge factor. I mean, it plays a huge factor here. As I said, there's incredible amount of racism against Arabs in this country. It's just like shocking. So let's see, connection between racism in U.S. and Palestine. Yeah, there's racism against Palestinians for sure. They're considered inferior. They're not considered human. That's why they can do all these horrible things to them. They just don't consider them to be human. Is it a factor in the Zapatista struggle? Yeah, sure, it is. Although the Zapatista struggle really kind of broke, in some ways, really broke the back of the at least the official racism that existed everywhere. I mean, it made a huge impact in racism against indigenous people, but of course, it still exists. But much, I think, at least sort of officially, much less in the past few decades. Does anybody else want to answer that question about racism?
I'll say that it reminds me of a comment that somebody made during the visit to Lid. Again, like all the Palestinians on that trip were people who like grew up around Israelis, around, in the surrounded by the settler society. And I remember this person told me that like how this racism against Palestinians and of Zionism impacts, like shows up among Israelis as well. And he said that he noticed that the most brutal soldiers that he had interactions with tended to be women and tended to be Black Israelis, actually. And he was just speaking to how it feels really upsetting to him too, because he sees that there's also this like great gradient of racism within Israeli society, and yeah, so he was just speaking to like this interconnection of race being this very layered thing under this occupation.
Right, we've got 2 minutes left. Is there any last minute comments or questions?
Yeah, no, I guess just a thank you for everybody to join in to listen. This is one of many. I'm sure there'll be more report backs as we continue to still process. And there's a lot of other villages and communities that we didn't showcase on these presentations because there were so many. There's 2 that were not mentioned here were Hebron and East Jerusalem. And so just know that hopefully we'll be able to maybe somehow add the presentation into our website, or on a future presentation, we're able to share more about these particular locations as well. But if you leave, I think since people register for this webinar, we can send an email to everybody that registered regarding who we are as Sexta Grietas del Norte, and also be able to send you any information and links about these different places and how you guys can support. But just a big thank you for everybody for this big collaboration and making this happen. It was a lot of tears and love in putting this presentation together in a good way, and just really graciously for to be able to share this experience with Michelle and Caitlin and Padme. And thank you for Natalia and Gus for facilitating the background for this. Gracias.
Yeah, I just want to last comment say that now that we have this PowerPoint, this presentation ready, and if people know of anybody who would be interested either in this recording or having us present it somewhere, let us know, because it's a sort of prepared thing now that we could repeat. Okay,